I think we've resolved the audio problem, so hopefully all of you are hearing clearly at this point. We come now to item number 10 on the agenda, which is the Papatoetoe Tornado Recovery Plan. And to discuss that, I've got Wayne Brown and Jennifer Rose. But before we have the presentation on it, I might ask Councillor Fessel Collins and then Councillor Sharon Stewart to move and second this in acknowledgement of their board roles in donating to the Merrill Relief Fund, if that's okay with both councillors. While this says it's a recovery plan, it's really retrospective, looking back on what we've done. And I do just want to begin by thanking all of those that contributed to, I think, a first-rate professional response to the Papatoetoe tornado. I see the cost of that tornado was in excess of $32 million, according to the Insurance Council, and that was probably the most costly tornado that has ever hit New Zealand. But having been there on 3 occasions, including on the day of the tornado, it was great to see not only our official agencies respond so quickly, but just the way the community responded and some of the community volunteer groups as well. And in addition to that, in the recommendations, we're thanking the Taupo District Council for providing 3 staffers and the New Zealand Red Cross, but also other partner agencies and other parts of Auckland Council for a very good response. So if Councillor Collins and Councillor Stewart are happy to move and second that, I assume that they are. And yep, that's good. Thank you. And I'll ask maybe Wayne Brown to begin and Jennifer Rose to contribute if she wishes. Wayne.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the report before you is to be recommending those thanks be given, but also recommending the approval of the recovery plan. As things have transpired, we fortunately had moved to the part where we were transitioning to business as usual prior to COVID. But if I just quickly recap on the report itself, there are 3 main parts that are relevant and 3 attachments. The affected area is shown in attachment 1, the weekly updates that were provided through the recovery, attachment 2, and the plan itself is attachment 3. Skipping over the executive summary, the context part of the report sets the scene for the recovery itself, and there is more detailed analysis of the tornado itself, its impacts and their consequences, which determine the activities that need to be undertaken for the recovery. It was primarily on private property, with vegetation affected as well, no sustained damage to infrastructure or community facilities, and we ourselves received no reports of damage to businesses or commercial properties, so the assumption there is they went direct through their insurers. A main point is that the tornado and the nature of it generates quite random damage. There were streets where some houses were damaged, some streets where none were damaged, and where the tornado touched down, there were clusters in and around adjoining streets. So the approach that we took was quite pragmatic, and we worked through networks rather than a large community engagement project because of that absence of sort of universal impact. The next section outlines what's in the plan. Firstly, the process whereby it has come forward to you today, and that is the liaison with the Otara Papatoetoe local board, their input and approval to the draft working plan, subsequently to the coordinating executive group, which is a part of the governance structure of our CDM group here in Auckland, and then coming to this governing body with the cancelled committee. The plan itself sets out its purpose, which, is the activities and actions that we identified would be required to support the community's recovery. And what we mean by recovery is really the re-establishment of daily routines of those who are affected. And though the formal recovery activity, the larger coordinated and additional effort has transitioned to BAU, I'm still very mindful that there are people still being hosted by the temporary accommodation service whose daily routines are yet to fully return or be re-established. One of the perhaps very useful pages I would refer to of the recovery plan appears on page 39 of the agenda, and it sort of sets out, in a sense, the recovery in a page. We focused on 3 particular areas of activity for the local community, local housing, and local amenity, each with separate goals, and the activities, the immediate focus, medium and long-term focus are set out there. The plan then goes on to set out how some of those activities would be tracked through, governance and risk. We correctly identified that delays to repairs would be an issue, and that loss of connection may be an issue for some. Unfortunately, we didn't identify a resurgence of COVID, and I think that's a particular oversight, I'm sorry to say. Another very important part of the plan that I would draw your attention to is on pages 45, 46 of the agenda, and this is where we'd mapped out how the return to business as usual would progress, which was largely on track. When we say return to business as usual, it's not the end of all activity, but the ability to cease the additional effort, the coordination and resource provided from across the council, as there is sufficient capacity at that point for business as usual processes to continue on. And a particular one in this case is the work of the regulatory teams involved in the building consents and the inspections and the removal of the placards that were affixed to buildings. The second part, or sorry, another part to highlight from the report itself was those acknowledgements, and thank you, Mia, you summarised those well. We're very conscious that this is the first time we've implemented a recovery in this way under guidelines that had been issued by NEMA, formerly Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency Management, just last year. So this is quite a new process for us, and it really is a collective effort, and it does require a lot of assistance from across the council groups, from our external partners, particularly Temporary Accommodation Service and MSD, but New Zealand Red Cross, and we were very grateful for the assistance provided by the Taupo District Council as well. It was extremely beneficial, but also the assistance provided by the Merrill Fund, which filled a significant gap and provided support that wouldn't otherwise have been available, made a significant difference to the recovery as well. For the next steps, it really is the continuation of repairs. There is the replacement street planting, the opportunity of enhanced street planting to be undertaken later, and exploring opportunities with local Maori. There was contact through the response and through the recovery with Ngāti Atara Marae and Ngākiti Wananga Marae. There was no support or assistance requested, but there was interest in learning more about emergency management and how it is that Te Ao Māori may be integrated, and we can build working relationships to prepare us better for the next time there is an emergency. So it's a great opportunity. At this point, perhaps, if it may be appropriate, other than saying the obvious, perhaps, with COVID at this stage and the lockdown, activity in the area has ceased. We've been liaising through our welfare function in Auckland Emergency Management, and we're keeping an eye on anything that comes up in terms of requests for assistance. We have a process for doing that. At this stage, there's nothing. And the reports from the last of the weekly updates is largely intact, although there has been some improvement with one less dwelling that is red, and there are now a few less families in the temporary accommodation service. In the last 2 weeks, we've only had one query from the public, and that is one where an inspection was requested. The owner of the property is happy to wait until the alert levels permit that activity to occur. That perhaps would be the end of the presentation.
Thanks very much, Wayne. Is there anything, Jennifer, Rose, that you'd like to add to that?
No, I'm actually okay. Thank you, Mayor. Just to say thank you to Councillor Filipaina for his help at the outset of that. It was really valuable for us in terms of that political interface, and also the work with the local board, seeing us, regularly and tapping in regularly. So the thing I would say is, in the recovery space, it's really important in terms of our political leaders feeding us information in terms of people that are out there that need help, because they don't always present themselves to us in a recovery situation. So that was really helpful.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Look, I'll just make a brief comment, and I might take questions and comments together. It's a reasonably straightforward paper. First of all, I think, notwithstanding the tragic loss of the life of one person at the inland port, going through that area straight after the tornado had been inflicted on it, and seeing the incredible state of damage localised to particular houses, it's nothing short of a miracle that we didn't have more serious injuries and even more fatalities in the area. The second thing, I just need to comment on the resilience of the community there. It's in particular heavily weighted towards a Asian and Indian Fijian community, and just watching the way people responded and worked to with family and friends to recover from that and to help each other was really inspiring. And the final thing, and I mentioned it at the opening of the Puanui station, the tornado was about 100 metres from the station, and I was really glad that our brand new $69 million station was not even touched by it. So there are things to count our blessings for, as well as acknowledging the damage and, of course, the pain to the family of the worker that was killed there. I've got three comments and questions, beginning with Councillor Efesor Collins. Efesor.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. And I'll throw my questions in first and then make a brief comment if that's all right. I guess the couple of questions I have relate to parts 9 of the report and part 11. I'm interested in with the communications, if outside of the visits that the Mayor and others have had, if there was face-to-face communication with any of the residents. And then just in point 11, I think you outlined it really well, but I know that one of the concerns that a number of us have is those who are uninsured, and perhaps the repercussions for those families. I know they don't self-identify, and there weren't many that kind of came forward anyway, but I'm just wondering if that's been in the back of our thinking about how we might just support those families if they are to present. And then I've got a quick comment after, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. Shall we take those questions first, Wayne? You might have your mute on, Wayne, and we can't hear you. We might have.
Okay,
are you there?
I can hear everybody, so perhaps.
Okay, Jennifer, if you'd like to take that, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So in terms of the face-to-face, we didn't, in recovery, a lot of the face-to-face had already happened during the response, so recovery is slightly different. We did attend a meeting at the Papatoetoe Library, which had community leaders at that meeting. But in terms of the face-to-face stuff, that was really done in recovery by the library, who had residents coming through, and they were partnering with us in terms of information going out. We also did targeted mail to affected households, which we were able to get email addresses and obviously the addresses through the rate systems. So we were able to target specific houses that we knew were in the tornado zone. The other point that you raised very validly around the non-insured. Now, that is a real struggle for recovery to know, because if people don't tell us, then we have no ability to find that out. The Insurance Council won't give that information because it's private information. So it's definitely a piece of work that we are feeding back to the Insurance Council around our ability to really connect with the vulnerable community that isn't insured, because how do we know unless a community leader tells us, or unless the person presents themselves and makes contact with a mayoral fund or something like that. So that's definitely something that we're going to work on in terms of the recovery piece. It was something that was a little bit out of our control, and we did ask landlords to please pass on information that we had, and for people to get in touch with us if they weren't insured and things like that, so that we could, do an assessment on them. But again, that wasn't easy, and that was one of the real challenges that we had.
Thanks, Professor. Would you like to make your comment now as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you both to Wayne and Jennifer Rose. I was really impressed with the way, I guess, the initial setup and response was handled, and then the recovery. Mayor, I just wanted to offer firstly my gratitude to both the Otara Papatoetoe local board and the Howick local boards, who were really supportive and topped up funds. And I'm really grateful for the way that they gave, the way that they were so generous. I want to thank you too, Mayor, because I think it was on the day or a day later that we went out, and we were joined by Councillor Stewart, Chair Aotearoa, and Member Dawn Trenberth, and we knew that Councillor Alf was in the background making a whole lot of things happen in the background. He was on the phone long before there was any movement. And so I just wanted to thank people who were on the ground and involved at the beginning of this, because it was a really tough time for quite a specified group in the community. And people may have seen Carla, who is the contact that Alf put me in connection with, who's part of the Papatoetoe Panthers, and some of the work that she did in the media, speaking on behalf of the residents on the streets and just the major challenges that they were facing. So I think all in all, our response was swift. I'm really grateful for the way people got involved, and I'm just so thankful that there were other councillors around the table, the table today, the e-table today, who were calling and texting and offering their support throughout the entire period too. So well done to the officers. Thank you so much for all your help, and a real commendation, especially to the Otara Papatoetoe local board, who've been really involved in ensuring that the community is aware of what's going on. And I think they're trying really hard to follow up to ensure that if there are families that haven't presented and are uninsured, that they wouldn't feel embarrassed about it and they'd start talking to someone. And one of the things that I remember too is that one of the sad backdrops to this was, there was real challenge in the community, but many of you will remember that there were real estate agents at the same time that were knocking on people's door in the middle of cleanup and asking them, hey, this might be the time to sell up. So look, some of that stuff started to emerge, and it was quickly pointed out by the mayor that this was unacceptable behaviour, and we really needed to stand alongside families. So thanks to everyone who's involved, and really happy, really grateful for the efforts that were put in. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. And yes, I remember Carla well. The Papatoetoe Panthers, by the way, for other councillors, is the local rugby league club, not the political organisation. Her house was almost totally demolished, and her boys, who were off to their league game, were sitting in the car outside the house and videotaped the tornado as it went over. And Carla showed me the pictures. It was just fantastic. Most of us would have been cringing under the seats of the car, and these boys simply calmly took a video of the tornado at its height, passing over the house, destroying the house, and over the top of the car. Quite amazing. Second question or comment is from Councillor Shane Henderson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to jump in really briefly to sort of make a special acknowledgement of the family and community around Janesh Prasad. Yeah, Councillor Cooper and I sort of had the privilege of attending the funeral, and it was a really emotional time, and you could see just how loved he was by many people. And as a resident of our ward, and someone that's a well-known and much-loved member of the community in Sunnyvale, I just wanted to kind of briefly acknowledge that, because it was a very tragic situation. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shane. I did talk to Janesh's widow, and I have also talked to government about, they were in the process of getting permanent residency, but it wasn't quite completed. And the feedback I've got is that, that application will be looked on from a humanitarian perspective, and I was very pleased about that. Final comment, I think, is from Councillor Alf Filipaina. Alf.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Look, I've got family and obviously many friends in Papatoetoe. So can I say from the outset, those that have contacted me, they have been very complimentary around the response that Auckland Council had. They obviously acknowledged the local board in the early days, and yourself and Councillor Collins. So look, I just wanted to sort of let you all know that yeah, those calls were coming in continuously to acknowledge yourselves, but more importantly to acknowledge Jennifer. That's because one of the beneficial things is to have somebody at the end of the line when the community's contacting you, asking you if you could do this, do this, do this. And I would contact Jennifer and get things done straight away as a result of contacting her. So to you, Jennifer, and to your team, thank you so much. That's on behalf of the people that I know in Papatoetoe. Also, Jennifer, I know your last final activity report on the 13th of August, so you don't really know how much they are in regards to me forwarding through to people that I know. Your Worship, when you speak about Carla, look, I got that call that morning, and she contacted me, and it was just so cool to know from yourself and Councillor Collins that you were going there, and that's why I was trying to feed back information she was giving me at the time. And I just remember saying to Carla, can you please tell me how many houses would have been affected? And then she got to about 20 something, and she said, well, Alf, that's all I can see, and that's our street, but all these houses have been affected. So look, just want to echo what Councillor Collins has said and thanked. I also want to thank the same people and Taupo District Council. So thank you so much, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alf. And I've also got a comment online from Sharon Stewart. If you'd, I went. The first person I rang, I think, on the morning, I was up at Dairy Flat and I heard about the tornado, hopped in the car, we'd been tree planting up there, came down, I rang Sharon on the way and she was there almost immediately. So Sharon, if you'd like to make a comment as well, please.
Thank you. I'd like to just make sure that we thank the Sikh community. They were marvellous. They were out there all day and late in the evenings, and they were giving out hot food and drinks. And I'd also like to make a very special mention of the Sushi Foundation, who also reached out to a lot of the families out there, and they gave them a lot of financial support. And some of the people that didn't have insurance, there were some things that they couldn't get funding for, they assisted. So a really big thank you for the Sikh community and the Sushi Foundation. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that, Sharon, and your efforts. And to the councillors and the local board members, and I've got to mention Apulu Rees Tangavaya, who was with me, I think, the following day when I went through again. Everybody that made that contribution, the
for the Manarewa councillors. The Takanini Gurdwara was there, and as Sharon said, serving serving chai and hot meals because the power was out. There was an Indian builder, and I'm just struggling to remember the name of the firm that he had, but he had the whole of his workforce, 30 people out there, pro bono, putting tarpaulins over the roofs of the damaged houses before it rained. There was just some fantastic stories there about real generosity and working collectively for the common good. And that was, I think, really uplifting. And by the time I got there, the police, fire, search and rescue, all of the agencies, St. John's, were all set up on the mobile site. They were already working to deal immediately with the crisis that had resulted from the tornado. So I think the public response to that, we would have got a lot of coverage if it had been bad. It wasn't bad, it was really good, so it didn't get quite so much coverage. But I think the way in which both private sector and voluntary agencies and the council and the central government agencies came together was something to be proud of. So finally, a special thanks to our council staff that worked quite so hard there, including our building inspectors that were out immediately. And I do want to mention the police, because a lot of people were concerned with their houses partly destroyed and having to live elsewhere, that there might not be security, and they worked around the clock to provide that security. So thank you very much for everybody's contribution. I'll put the resolutions. You'll note that I've added in as chair resolution B, thanking the boards in particular. That was hugely generous, and the mayoral relief fund, it ended up at $300,000. I think was hugely appreciated. It did make a difference in people's lives. So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Slightly time delayed with the mics off. Those opposed, I declare the motion carried. The next item is item number 11. It's the appointment to the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee.